Good morning, everyone. This is Mike Klinger. I'm the Work Incentive Specialist for the Virginia Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, or DARS. And a big part of my job is to provide technical assistance and training to our network of vocational rehabilitation counselors and work incentive specialists on things like how Social Security is going to count income when a beneficiary of Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, goes to work. And also, I do a lot of training on some of the different work incentives that are out there. And work incentives serve to reduce the amount of money that Social Security counts against an individual's check when they first go to work, allowing them to keep more of their benefits while they test their ability to work. So, I'm going to be talking to you today about some work incentives that apply to transition aid youth that are on SSI, and that's usually folks that are between the ages of 18 and 24. So I'll be talking to you today about how Social Security looks at income and how income is counted when a person who is receiving SSI first goes to work, and some of the different work incentives that are out there. On this very first slide, this is just an overview of some of the specific work incentives that I'm going to talk about today. Student earned income exclusion, impairment-related work expenses, Section 301, and achieving a better life experience, or ABLE accounts. And I'll go through all these in detail when we get to those appropriate slides. But the one thing that I want you to keep in mind and remember as I'm going through all the slides is that it's a common misconception that people that are on SSI either can't work or they have to limit the amount of hours they can work, because there's a misconception out there that if people go to work, they're automatically going to lose all their benefits and their health insurance. And that's not true. There are work incentives out there that protect clients' benefits and health insurance while they test their ability to work. And we're going to be talking today about how some of these work incentives work. So just keep in mind that people that are on SSI can work and keep more of their benefits while they test their ability to work and determine how much they can work. So we're going to be talking about all these things in detail. So the first thing I wanted to talk through with you about is how Social Security looks at income when an SSI recipient goes to work. And the most important thing to remember is that Social Security never counts all the income that a person earns from a job when determining how much SSI they're eligible for when they work. There are certain exclusions that apply um, to how much of the person's income that Social Security counts. So the first thing that Social Security does not count or disregard is the first $20 of the person's earnings every month. That's called a general income exclusion that every person on SSI gets. They also don't count the first $65 of the person's earnings. That's called the earned income exclusion, and that's an exclusion that everybody on SSI gets also. After they take off the $20 exclusion and the $65 exclusion, Social Security does also not count one half of the remainder of whatever's left of those earnings, and they don't count the value of any work incentives. Okay, I know that's a lot and it's probably very confusing. So on the next slide, I just want to show you an example of how it works, help make it clear. And this is an example of using 2023 figures. And in this example, we have Joe. Joe gets a job earning $1,500 a month and is receiving SSI. He has questions about how Social Security is going to count his income when he goes to work. So the first thing that Social Security is going to look at is how much in wages that Joe makes every month. And this is a gross income figure. So they're going to look at how much a person is making before deductions for health insurance, taxes, all that stuff. Okay. So they start with the gross wages that the person makes in a month. They don't count the first $20 of it, which is the general income exclusion. They also don't count the first $65 of that income, which is the earned income exclusion, which leaves $1,415 left. From that, remember from the previous slide, I said that they also don't count one half of the remainder. That brings the countable income down to $707.50. What that means is, even though he's getting a job making $1,500 a month, Social Security is not going to count all that income when they determine how much SSI he's eligible for. They're only going to count out of that $1,500 a month, $707.50. That's how much of his income is countable after Social Security applies all the exclusions. What they do from there is they would look at how much SSI he would be entitled to if he had no other income. As of January 1st, 2023, the most in SSI that a person can receive is $914 a month if they had no other income other than SSI. So they'll take that base rate that he would get if he had no other income and subtract from it how much of his wages are countable. We said after all exclusions, it's $707.50. That leaves $206.50. Okay. That's how much SSI Joe would be entitled to per month if he got a job making $1,500 a month. At first glance, that's really scary because all you see is that his SSI check is lower. And I know that's confusing and scary to a lot of folks, but remember that it doesn't stop there. You have to look at the big picture of how much more income that he would have coming in as he works. And I'm going to show you that on the next slide. So just to keep in mind that individuals who are on SSI will always have more money coming in if they work as opposed to benefits alone. A person on SSI, we said, cannot receive more than $914 a month on SSI in 2023. Obviously, that's not a lot of money. So people are going to be better off financially when they go to work. So consider the example on the previous slide that with work of $1,500 a month, a person's total monthly income jumps from $914 to $1,706.50. And how I got that was I took the $206.50 that Joe would receive in SSI if he got a job making $1,500 a month and added his $1,500 in wages to it. Okay. So as you can see, if a person on SSI gets a job making $1,500 a month, just as an example, they have almost $800 more a month coming in than they would on SSI alone. Now, obviously, from that, he would have to pay things like taxes and things like that, but still, he still is going to have more money coming in when he works as opposed to benefits alone. Okay. So just remember that even though the SSI check is going to go down when a person works, that the person is always going to have more money coming in. You have to look at the bigger picture, not just how benefits are going to change, but the goal is to focus on how disposable income is going to go up as the person works. Okay. So on the next slide, I just want to go through some of the different work incentives that apply to transitions age youth, again, folks between the ages of 18 and 24. And again, work incentives reduce the amount of money that Social Security counts against a person's SSI check when they go to work. And the first one I want to talk through with you is the Student Earned Income Exclusion, or SEIE. This one applies to folks who are on SSI, they're students, and that are under the age of 22. And a student, for the purposes of this work incentive, means that they're in high school for at least 12 hours a week, in college for at least 8 hours a week, or in a vocational training program to prepare for at least for a job for at least 15 hours a week. So that could be if somebody's working with vocational rehabilitation, like the Department for Aging and Rehab Services, and they're in a job training program, that could be an example of what meets Social Security's definition of a student. Okay, so they have to either be in high school for at least 12 hours a week, college for at least 8 hours a week, or in a training program preparing for a job for at least 15. If the person is on SSI, is not yet age 22, and meets the criteria for being a student, Social Security will not count up to $2,220 in wages per month that the person earns, up to a maximum of $89.50 per year in 2023 against that student's benefits. Okay, so let me give you an example of that on the next slide to show you how it works. Sam is on SSI and he just turned 19. He's in college for 10 hours a week and he's working part-time earning $1,200 a month. Okay, so he's under the age of 22. He's in college for 10 hours a week. He meets Social Security's criteria for being a student. He's earning $1,200 a month. And what that means is that Social Security will not count the $1,200 a month that he earns every month against his benefits, which very simply means that because he's a student and he's eligible for the student earned income exclusion, he can work and earn $1,200 a month and keep his entire SSI benefit every month until he earns up to a maximum of $89.50 for the year. Okay. So that's an example of how a work incentive can reduce countable income. As a general, what this is saying is that because he's a student receiving SSI, Social Security is not going to count any of his wages against his SSI benefit and allow him to keep his entire check until he earns $89.50 for the year. Okay. Keep in mind that that's a figure that's specific to 2023, and that typically goes up every year. Social Security allows a student to earn more money every year and still keep their entire benefit. Another work incentive that I want to talk through with you about is, well, actually, I wanted to go back and just say one more thing about the student income exclusion before we move on. In order to request this from Social Security, usually this is done by writing a letter to the local Social Security field office requesting the student earned income exclusion be applied to the client's record. And Social Security is going to ask for proof of enrollment in school. So it could be like a class schedule, a letter from the school on school letterhead verifying how often the client attends class, things of that nature. So it has to be requested in writing to the client's local Social Security office, and there has to be documentation provided that the client is a student in order for Social Security to not count their income against the SSI check. And as we get down later in the presentation, I'll explain to you where you can go for help accessing these work incentives. Next one I wanted to talk through with you about is impairment-related work expenses, or IRWEs. And this is one that can be used by either individuals on SSI or SSDI at any age. So it can be used by youth between the ages of 18 and 24, but it can also be used by an SSI beneficiary or an SSDI beneficiary at any age. Social Security will not count the cost of certain expenses as part of a client's income when determining a client's eligibility for benefits or how much benefits they're going to get in a month. Okay. There's some specific criteria for this. The expense has to be related to the client's disability. It has to be related to the client's work. It has to be paid for by the client out of pocket and not reimbursed by any other source. So nobody else can pay for this expense. Health insurance can't pay for it. It has to be an expense that the client incurs as a result of going to work that they pay for and is not reimbursed by anybody else. And the way that it works with SSI folks is that Social Security will increase a client's SSI check 50 cents for every dollar in IRWEs that Social Security has approved. And I have an example on the next slide to kind of show you how that works. So this is Jennifer, and Jennifer has a disability that prevents her from being able to drive herself to work. She takes the bus back and forth to work and spends $120 a month on transportation. She pays for the transportation herself without help from others, and she earns $1,500 a month from work on the job. Okay. So remember what we talked about. The criteria for this work incentive is she's got a disability. She checks that box. She's not able to drive, so she has to take the bus back and forth to work. So the expenses related to her work, she wouldn't be able to work without that transportation. She pays for the transportation herself and is not reimbursed by anybody else. So she checks all the boxes for an impairment related work expense. So because she has a disability related work expense, not as much of her income is going to count against her SSI check as it would if she wasn't using this work incentive. And I'll talk more about that on the next slide. So here's an example, and this formula will look a little bit familiar from the beginning of the presentation, but with a little bit of difference. So again, they're going to look at the gross monthly wage that the client earns per month and deduct from that always the general income exclusion, which is that $20 that we talked about. They're also going to deduct $65, which is the earned income exclusion, which brings her countable income down to $1,415 a month. Now, before they divide that number in half, they're also going to take away from the countable income $120 a month that she's paying out of pocket for the bus to get her back and forth to work. That brings her countable income down to $1,295. Then, after they deduct all the general work exclusions and her transportation expenses, then they're going to divide that number by 2. Okay. That brings her countable income down to $647.50. Then from that, they're going to take the SSI rate that she would get if she had no other income, which is $914. Deduct from that the $647.50 that's countable from her $1,500 in wages that she's earning after they take the exclusions and transportation expenses off. And that leaves a remainder of $266.50, which is the new SSI check. And going back to the beginning of the presentation, where I used an example of a client making $1,500 a month without using any work incentives, his SSI check was actually lower. Let's go back to the beginning just as a refresher. So without any work incentives, a client that was earning $1,500 a month, his SSI check is $206.50. But if you have an example of a client using an impairment-related work expense, again, that SSI check is going to go $50 for every dollar that the client spends. Social Security is going to allow that client to keep more of their SSI check as they work, and her SSI check is going to be $266.50. So you can see right there that using a work incentive like an impairment-related work expense allows the client to keep more of their SSI benefit as they work, and she's got more money coming in her SSI than she would if she wasn't using a work incentive. Okay. So in order to request that Social Security approves this one, what a client would do is kind of the same thing as the student earned income exclusion, is write a letter to their claims representative at the local Social Security office stating that they have a disability, that they have impairment-related work expenses that they pay for out of pocket that are related to their work as a result of their disability, and then they would put in the letter how much they're spending per month. With that letter requesting that work incentive, they should attach copies of any receipts they have showing the expense. So if it was an example of a transportation expense, what a client would do is just save receipts showing what they spent for the month and submit receipts with a copy of that letter as proof of what they spent. And again, when we get to the end of the presentation, I'll explain to you where you can go for help getting these work incentives put into place. It's not anything you have to do on your own. There are, services and help available that can help you and the folks you're working with put these in place. Okay. Next thing I wanted to talk about was achieving a better life experience or ABLE accounts. And this is really, really huge because prior to the implementation of the ABLE Act, folks that are on SSI couldn't save more than $2,000 in resources, or they would have their benefits suspended. And resources are anything that's in a checking account or savings account. The general rule was always that a client couldn't have more than $2,000 in the bank, or it was going to impact their SSI benefits. And this often forced people that were on SSI to remain in poverty. They weren't allowed to save any money because if they did, it was going to impact their benefits and health insurance. The implementation of the ABLE Act by Congress has changed everything. So the Achieving a Better Life Experience, or ABLE Act, is national, but in Virginia, the program is called ABLE Now, and it's run by Virginia 529, and it's open to any individual disabled before the age of 26. Okay. Now, a person doesn't need to be on SSI or SSDI to take advantage of having an ABLE account. It's open to any individual who is disabled prior to the age of 26. If somebody is on SSI or SSDI, when they request enrollment in an ABLE account, that's sufficient enough proof of disability. If they're not on Social Security benefits or SSI when they enroll in an ABLE account, what a client would typically do is get a statement from their doctor, just verifying that the doctor is aware that the person has a disability and the disability occurred before the age of 26. Okay. So this account is open to anybody disabled before the age of 26, regardless of whether or not they're receiving any type of Social Security or SSI benefits. Here's where the great news comes in. Resources put into an ABLE account do not, I repeat, do not impact eligibility for needs-based programs like SSI and Medicaid. So again, like I said, before the implementation of the ABLE Act, people weren't allowed to save more than $2,000. Now they're allowed to save a lot more money, and it's not going to impact their eligibility for SSI and Medicaid. Right now, an individual who's eligible for an ABLE account, including contributions that can be made to the account by family members or friends, a person can save up to $16,000 a year in an ABLE account without it impacting their SSI benefits. If a person is on SSI, they're allowed to save up to $100,000 in an ABLE account before their SSI benefits are impacted. Okay. So obviously that's a huge, huge work incentive that allows people who are on SSI benefits to save a lot more money without having to worry about that money impacting their eligibility for benefits. What a person can use an ABLE account on is very broad. The definition of a qualified disability expense just says that anything they can use the funds on anything that would improve their quality of life. So it could be anything from housing expenses to utilities to medical bills to even vacations. So really there's no limit on what a person can use the money in Enable account for, as long as it improves their quality of life. So that's a really huge added benefit. It's a great work incentive for people that are on SSI and Medicaid to save a lot more money than they used to be able to be allowed to do and still keep their entire benefits. Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk about was a common benefit change at age 18. Sometimes people are on benefits as a minor prior to age 18. And there's a couple of different things that happen when a person that's on SSI becomes age 18. The first thing is that a client may be able to become their own payee for benefits once they turn 18 and become a legal adult. So a lot of the time, a client who's on benefits as a child has a parent or a guardian as their payee, and they're responsible for managing their SSI funds. Once a client turns 18, they can legally become their own payee for their own benefits, as long as they don't have a mental impairment that would preclude them from managing their own money. So one of the things that happens when a person turns 18 is that they can legally become their own payee for their own SSI benefits. They no longer have to have a parent or guardian manage it for them. If a client is on SSI prior to age 18, right before their 18th birthday, Social Security is going to send them a letter informing them that they'll have to go what's called an age 18 redetermination, where Social Security is going to look at whether or not the client is still disabled under their rules. The reason why they do that for folks that are on SSI at age 18 is because prior to age 18, the definition of a disability is just that a client has a disability that's going to last at least 12 months, and it renders them incapable of performing activities of daily living on their own. So they have some sort of barrier in terms of, it could be a physical disability or a mental disability that impacts their learning. Those kind of things would qualify them for SSI benefits. When a client turns 18, Social Security is also going to look at whether or not the disability is going to last at least 12 months or more, but also impact their ability to work. Okay. So the definition of what constitutes a disability when a person turns 18 changes a little bit. So Social Security is going to go back and look at all the medical evidence that they have on file already. They may ask for any updated medical evidence. So if a client has received updated medical treatment for their disability since they've been on benefits, or if they've had any hospital stays, or if they've had any operations or any new medications, Social Security is going to ask for updated medical information to make a determination as to whether or not the client is still disabled at age 18. So sometimes what'll happen is that Social Security will come back and say, okay, we've gone through the medical evidence, and we found that even though you were disabled as a child, we find that you are able to work now, and you're no longer eligible for benefits. Okay. So sometimes if a person is on SSI and they turn 18, they're going to lose benefits at that point because Social Security is going to find them no longer disabled unless the medical evidence is clear that the disability impacts them from being able to work and earn a substantial living. Okay. There's a work incentive that can be used in a case like that called Section 301 of the Social Security Act that says if a client is working with an agency like vocational rehabilitation, at the time that a determination is made that they're no longer disabled, the person can keep their benefits and health insurance as long as they work with that vocational rehabilitation agency, and they would not lose their benefits until after that case closed. Okay, so if a client is on benefits and Social Security says you're no longer disabled at age 18, they would be eligible for continued benefits and health insurance until such time that their case with VR closed. Okay. That's just a work incentive that allows the client to keep their benefits until such time they complete their training program that would prepare them from being able to accept a job. Okay. Last big change is that a client might be eligible for childhood disability benefits or CDB when they turn 18. Childhood disability benefits allows a client to receive Social Security disability insurance benefits on the record of a parent, as long as that parent is either disabled, deceased, or retired. Okay. So sometimes, if a client is on SSI at age 18, they might be eligible for continued benefits, additional benefits, if they have a deceased, disabled, or retired parent, um, and the client has a disability. So sometimes there is eligibility for extra benefits to come into play when a client turns 18. Um, that if you think that your child might have eligibility for CDB benefits, you would have to contact the local Social Security office, and they would have to make a determination for that. But just keep in mind that there are some additional benefits that could be available to a child um, once they turn 18 that aren't available previously. So, just wanted to take a minute to explain to you uh, how you can contact agency for more help. So, if you want more information on how SSI, Social Security is going to look at income when an SSI recipient goes to work, if you have questions about work incentives, or if you need help accessing work incentives, you can contact the Social Security funded Work Incentives Planning and Assistance or WIPA project at 1-866 968 7842. These are free services that will link you up with a certified benefits specialist that can go through with you and your child how work is going to impact benefits and disposable income, health insurance, and they also help the person screen eligibility for any work incentives that they might be eligible for. So, just going back to our examples, if you have a person that might meet the criteria for a student or an income exclusion or impairment related work expense, or if they need help setting up an ABLE account, those are all things that a work incentives planning and assistance benefit specialist can help you access and put into place with Social Security. Okay. So, any questions related to benefits, impact on health insurance, work incentives, or needing help, those would all go through the WIPA project. And you can make a phone call to refer your child. Services, again, are free, and the benefits specialist can work with you to answer any questions you have about work, disposable income, impact on health insurance, and accessing any work incentives. Okay. If you're getting help through vocational rehabilitation, like if your child is working with the Department for Aging and Rehabilitative Services, or if they're receiving Medicaid waiver, additional help might be available through their participation with VR or their Medicaid waiver. So if you're working with DARS, for an example, you would ask your um, child's vocational rehabilitation specialist about accessing work incentive services through their participation with VR, or if they're on Medicaid waiver, you could ask their Medicaid worker for more information about accessing um, services that would be paid for through Medicaid that would provide benefits counseling. One last thing I wanted to talk about was how benefits are going or how health insurance would be impacted as a client goes to work. There are work incentives out there, and I'm not going to get too much detail in them about it, but there are work incentives out there that would allow a client to keep their Medicaid as they go to work, even if they're earning enough to work their way off cash benefits. There is going to come a point where a person earns enough to work their way off of cash benefits, but there are protections that allow for ongoing Medicaid eligibility, even if cash benefits stop due to work. So a person is usually never going to lose their health insurance, even if they get a job making enough money to cause their SSI benefits to go to zero. Again, if you have further questions about impact of work on health insurance, that would be another thing that you could contact the WIPA project about, and a benefit specialist could sit down with you and go through all the different work incentives that apply to somebody who's receiving SSI and Medicaid, and some of the protections that are available to allow the person to keep their insurance. Okay. Keep in mind that everything that I've talked about today, the examples and some of the numbers I referenced in the work incentive slides, are based on 2023 numbers. However, usually Social Security does announce the changes for the next year about mid-October every year. Okay, so by mid-October of 2023, the changes for 2024 will be out. If you're looking for updated information about what the numbers are for any given year, you would just Google, for example, 2024 Social Security changes in mid-October 2023, and all the information would come up there for you. So keep in mind, if you're watching this after 2023, that you would look for the Social Security changes to be published by mid-October for the following year. So if you're looking for updated information, just Google the Social Security changes for 2024, and you would be able to find them very easily just through Google. Okay. If you have any other questions or concerns about any of the content in this presentation, you are free to email me at Michael, Michael, .Klinger, KLINGER, at dars.virginia.gov, or you're free to call me. My number is 804-245-5593. So anything related to questions you have about benefits, the impact of work on benefits, work incentives, things of that nature, I would be glad to answer any questions you have, beyond any help that you might get from the WIPA project. So feel free to reach out if you need clarification or more information on any of the information provided in this presentation today. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.